Hello, I'm Lisa Harrison, and today is Friday, the 6th of April. And today I'm speaking with Melanie Spencer from Freedom Central. Morning, Mel, or midnight for you.
Yes, it is. It is indeed. Hi, Lisa. Thanks for having me speak to you. I'm really good, big fan of the work that you do, and I find a lot of your interviews very interesting. So it's been great to connect with you.
Oh, lovely, thank you. And likewise. The reason I was looking forward to talking to you is nothing, not to take anything away from the people I've spoken to so far, but predominantly men and predominantly from the US.
Yes.
So talking to you gives me the opportunity to get another female perspective, for one, but also you're South African born and European based, so there's a whole different cultural perspective. You're one of the few female researchers and authors that I'm aware of. Most of those are also men. Um, so yeah, this just makes for a really nice change, for one thing. So
Yeah.
how did you end up where you are? What kicked all this off for you? Because the alternative media genre is heavily populated with men. You're one of the few.
Yeah. Yes, I know. Um, well, Lisa, it's not actually something that's defined in a journey that starts at one point. I guess in a lot of ways, what I've come to realize down the line is that I was always destined to go along this path. You know, we talk about coming here and fulfilling our purpose, and I definitely think this was mine. But I've just had so many different experiences to get me to where I am now. And while you're going through all these various things, you go, what the hell's going on? Why is this happening to me? But it's only now that I've come down the line, I go, oh, okay, well, that's why that happened. And that's why I met that person. And that's why I had that experience or that nasty thing happened there. It was all to prepare me for what I am doing now.
Mm.
And so, yeah, as you say, born in South Africa. And I guess a good place to start really is, as you say, I'm an author. And my book is called The South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy. And it's a trilogy. And the first one is entitled Light and Dark. And I mentioned in the outset of the book that, although I'm white and I grew up in a privileged family because I am white, that was really the truth when I was in South Africa, is that, white people did tend to have a more privileged upbringing. It didn't mean that I didn't suffer. Having lost my grandfather, my mom, lost my grandfather when she was 4 years old, and as a result, had a troubled upbringing, and that impacted on me. Her program impacted on me because of that. And my grandfather was trapped in a mine for I think 5 days alive before he died. And they didn't bother drilling them out or anything. And South Africa has one of the poorest safety records in terms of mining. And then when you look at the whole sort of the global conspiracy aspect and how important the gold is and the mining, and then you draw that into South Africa, who produces 60% of the world's gold, there's a whole part of research that isn't really covered by the mainstream media researchers with regards to South Africa and Africa in particular. I mean, there's a lot of interest now in Northern Africa with the invasion of Libya and Syria. People are starting to pay attention to what's going on in Africa, which historically they've always ignored us, except other than to help us themselves to our resources. But for me, I think that it's important that people sort of pay more attention to what's going on down there because there is so much that's not being written about. There's no South African authors, to my knowledge, who have actually written about what's happening in terms of the conspiracy from the South African point of view. You hear about 9/11, America, all the different wars that started them, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, all the different things in Europe. You hear all these wonderful people in sort of the Northern Hemisphere speaking out. And I must say, wonderful people down in Australia doing good work too. But really, to understand the entire global conspiracy, you need to understand the importance of gold in the whole thing. And of course, with South Africa producing 60% of it, people need to understand what's really going on down there. And I think, it's the most obvious example of the extremes of, the most extreme example of poor and rich divide. It really is. It's the furthest rich and poor divide on the planet at the moment. And in order to sort of bring that together and, alleviate the poverty and sort of give everybody a better quality of living, one of the places to start is where it's at its worst, I suppose, bring equality to a place where the inequality is so greatly vast. It's not a black and white thing, Lisa. It's now quite simply come down to what it's always been about, and that is the monopolization of money and wealth by the few.
Mm. That's global.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. It's a global problem. It doesn't matter where you are. In every country, it's happening. Almost every country is controlled, as you know, by a small minority of people who, unfortunately, don't really give much of a hoot about the rest of us. And, they've certainly not paid respect to the entire cycle of life on our planet, and we're the ones who are suffering for it.
So were you still in South Africa and seeing the equality around you
Yeah.
when you started questioning and started researching, or was it once you left South Africa?
I tell you, once I left South Africa, to be honest with you, growing up in South Africa, I was never okay with the way things were. I was always distinctly aware that it wasn't okay that, a good example is that, our housekeeper lived in the servants' quarters, so to speak. And I invited her in for dinner one night and had her sit down and eat dinner with me. And my parents thought this was quite, quirky because it wasn't done. For me, I always kind of pushed the boundaries with those sort of things, and I knew it wasn't right. And then I went off to London at the age of 23 and started exploring my perspectives, moving out of the sort of very small perspective that growing up in South Africa gives you, and experiencing far more. And for the first time, meeting people of every kind of race and nation, working equally in work environments, having had good educations. And when I started to notice things and started to research things, started at around the time that I moved into media. And there were just so many things that happened within about a 2-year period, which I started to go, hang on, something's not right. First off, what they're putting out there, and I know this because I was part of the creative process in producing some of these shows, is completely fiction. Especially the stuff we call reality TV is very staged. It's very scripted. People are put into situations where they have to deal with extreme stress. They're exploited. The number of people or contributors that I've dealt with working in sort of reality TV who've had breakdowns and all sorts, I just thought to myself, my word, they really, it's a twisted perspective. People have this iconoclastic view of what being famous is, and fame isn't even a real thing. It's like this sort of illusionary monster that is used like to dangle in front of us to keep us hoping for that thing that's never going to be. And if we ever get there, we are going to find out it's not real, and you're going to have to sell your soul to keep it. And really, I mean, that's in a nutshell what it was all about for me. I found out whilst working in alternative media, stuff ain't right. Didn't quite put my finger on it, but it started to occur to me when I especially moved into fashion styling after having been a plus-size model for a number of years. When I started working with music videos and fashion shoots, I started learning a lot about symbolism, because that is what the people, they specifically ask you when they cast you, what is your speciality? And you've got to tell them occult symbolism. Knowing how to dress a monarch slave, for example, in black or white. You don't know that they're a monarch slave. You just know that certain people will always be dressed in black and white stripes, butterflies. They love their sort of anything that's a little bit witchy. And those are all the things that get requested for music videos, for fashion shoots, very specifically. And, even then I wasn't aware of what it was all about. It's a very, very small part of the overall picture. I just thought, they're a little bit edgy. That's it, like a little bit rock and roll. That's the way it was perceived. But, as you start to learn more, you start to realize that, hey, you worked for the devil. I mean, one of the people I worked for, for an example, as a stylist was Coca-Cola. And, they're not exactly health conscious people, are they? They don't necessarily keep the population healthy.
Mm-mm. So then what made you create Freedom Central? How did you go from working as a stylist to Freedom Central?
Well, this is interesting. It was I was doing a shoot for MAC at the time in a place called London Bridge, just in London. It's an area of London where they've got this beautiful sort of two-tower bridge, which actually looks like two obelisks with a suspended bridge between it. And it was just the most awful people I worked with on the shoot. And through this whole shoot that I'm doing, you know, and I'm working with these people, I'm just so miserable. And I just walked out onto the bridge afterwards when everything was over. And I stood there just looking at watching the boats go in and out under the bridge. And I kind of looked over this bridge and I stood up on this little ledge thing. It wasn't even a ledge. It's kind of like a little ledge, but just stood up and looked over the bridge. And all of a sudden, everything went black. And I cannot describe this. Has never happened to me before. I've never lost time. I've never, you know, fainted and not been aware of what's going on. But you know, everything went black and it felt like I was standing there for hours, but it was literally a matter of minutes. What I saw, and I was now looking down the Thames towards where Greenwich is. Now, this is where the Millennium Stadium and all that's being built. Looking down in that direction, and all I could see was everything was black. The buildings had fire coming out from underneath them, and there was blood dripping down the top of them. No, not a realistic image that you would ever really see, but I think it was symbolic of something else. At the time, I had no idea what it was, and I thought I was having a mental breakdown. So I went home and I said to my husband, you know, who is Dutch, I need to get out of London. I don't know what it is about this place. I just have to get out. I have to clear my head. The vibe here is not good. Let's get away for the weekend. And like that, the next day we just drove over the Channel Tunnel and had a bit of a break in Holland and popped into Amsterdam and had a bit of fun there and visited my favorite place called Conscious Dreams, which I tell you, this place is amazing. If you ever get to Amsterdam, you must go there. And in this place, there was this girl working there and she had a tattoo on her arm. She looked like a pixie, and I just thought this tattoo looked so out of place. And for some other reason, something inside me, as she put my tea down in front of me, just, you know, said, ask her what it means. And so I did, and it was a Sanskrit tattoo. And it said, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And that was a translation of it. Now in the film The Matrix, strangely enough, Keanu Reeves, the character Neo, is told to follow the white rabbit tattoo. The tattoo. So this tattoo thing is quite significant, and it comes up again and again for us, particularly when you get onto my later work. Some of the tattoos we've had in our earlier lives were actually came through as very symbolic later on, and I'll talk about that just now. But anyway, so this is the story. This girl had this tattoo that said, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, and it was like something in my head clicked. And right there and then I said to my husband, I don't care, let's leave London. Walked out of everything, walked out of a media career, and come live in Holland. I have to be here. This is the place I have to be. We've got to do it. So we did. And within a week, we had packed up everything, bought an old van and driven across the Channel Tunnel again with all our stuff, my cat and my rabbit, my husband, and as much as we could pile into this van. And as we got across the Channel Tunnel, and these photos are actually on Facebook, I pulled out a marker out of my handbag, which for whatever reason was in there, and I wrote down the side of this van, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And that is actually out of a song by Janis Joplin. So I went and wrote on the back of the van, Janis, with a peace sign. And the van from there on was called Janis, our freedom wagon, because we kind of left London in pursuit of freedom. And, you know, one of the things I really did find when I moved to Holland was a completely different mindset of people to what I had been used to. And it was really the right move. I mean, clearly the universe was telling me, okay, get out of London, go to Holland. You got people to meet, they've got stuff to teach you, that's where you need to be. And so I did. And that's how I ended up in the Netherlands. And my husband got a job sooner than I did because I didn't speak fluent Dutch. And I was going to yoga every morning to keep myself in a routine, Bikram yoga, loved it. And coming home and spending a bit of time emailing. And for some other reason, I just, at that point, decided to start writing a book. I had always wanted to write a book, and really I wanted it to be about what happened in the media industry and what I perceived as the fake world. So as I started researching, you know, illusionary media and stuff, you can imagine the stuff I came into.
Yes, you know, that's a big rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, exactly. And once you start, you know, this is it. Once you start to dig, you know, be prepared to go all the way or don't go at all, really. And with that, I found Zeitgeist. I then Googled Bilderberg, and oh my word, that took me on to Alex Jones, and Alex Jones took me on to David Icke. David Icke took me on to Jordan Maxwell, and so forth and so forth. And I just found Camelot and this whole world of information. But what's significant is the first interview of David Icke that I watched was a Project Camelot interview that he did. And in this Project Camelot interview, now this is only 2 months after we've moved to the Netherlands, he says specifically in this interview, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. So here's me, I freak out. Now, the ironic thing is, at this time, I actually still never heard that song.
Oh, really? Okay.
I had never heard the song, yet this verse had come to me from 2 different places. And I thought, okay, right, this, I need to follow this, yeah? Followed the tattoo, I'm following this. From that onwards, I then went and found out everything I could from David Icke about everything he knew, and that took me on to the reptilian stuff, which is the content of my second book, which is called The Eye of the Dragon. And a lot of people have criticized me going, oh, you're just rehashing David Icke's information. But as I said, a lot of things happened to me in my life which I didn't realize what it was at the time, which has been very significant. One of the things being I was born in the year of the dragon. And if you look at the Chinese zodiac, all the animals on the Chinese zodiac are in fact real animals that we can identify and see in everyday life. The dragon is the only one that's apparently mythological. It's not mythological. Yeah, so of course as a kid I was questioning, do they exist? How can every other animal exist but that one? It was a logical question for a kid to ask. So there was always that. And then of course my husband and I are both obsessed with dragons since we were very young. My husband actually has a set of dragon wing tattoo on his back. Set of wings, which I designed for him, and we had done when we still lived in London and knew nothing about this stuff. So we've got this attachment to sort of and fascination with dragons, anything to do with dragons, for a long time. It goes way back to when I was a university student. And then this started to come through the David Icke's information. I started to realize, hang on, this is why I've always been so fascinated with these creatures. And I started to look at all the symbolism. And true enough, anthropomorphized suns, those are the sun symbol, sun gods with a sun face on it. I've got a sun tattoo on my ankle, which I got when I was 19, exactly the same, with a face on it. And very unique things like that have sort of come to me. Okay, these symbols were coming to me at various times in my life. And also paintings. Like in 1995, after a car accident, which I was in a wheelchair for a year, I painted this painting, which is the cover of my first book, of a sun and a moon in scales. Now, that's 1995. That's long before I knew anything about anything to do with this stuff. And it's so significant now that it's actually very, very fitting as the cover of my first book. So there's a lot of things in my life which have sort of obviously been pointers, which I didn't know the significance at the time, and I've later on found out that I've meant to be going down this path of research and finding out what's going on and questioning things, and these symbols were given to me as a sort of guidance at the time, didn't know what was happening. And so basically there we are in Holland, and David Icke comes to town, and I emailed him and I said, look, I love your work, would you oblige me an interview? And he agreed to speak to me, and that was when I got my first interview with David Icke. It was the third one we did as Freedom Central. And how we actually decided to start Freedom Central was after I started learning about all this stuff, we attended a Project Camelot conference on the 1st of August, 2009. Kerry Cassidy was there, Bill Ryan was there, Arthur Neumann, known as Henry Deacon on their Project Camelot site, he was there. Desiree Rover, who's the vaccine expert in Holland, she was there. She's just come back from Australia. She's been out there with Vera Shriver. And we met Desiree, and we basically, the week before this conference, had actually gone and charged the Dutch government with plotting mass genocide, believe it or not. How ignorant were we? We had taken Jane Burgermeister's evidence and gone to the police thinking we could charge the Dutch government with plotting mass genocide because that's what Jane Burgermeister had apparently done. It's still questionable as to if she ever did it, but she gave a lot of us an idea, and we tried it out. And I must say the police, they kind of looked at us and checked their records to see if we were escaped mental patients before they took us seriously. And, that was really the start of Freedom Central. And then, as I said, the next week was the conference where we met Desiree Rover, and she had heard about these people from The Hague who had done this gone to the police, and we got our first interview with her. And that was when Freedom Central started. The next one was with a friend of hers, Dr. John Consumeldo, who is a sound healing expert and a healing music composer. Anything you need to know about sound and vibrational frequencies. And he taught me the fundamental basics of the nature of and composition of reality. And a genius of a guy. And then the third interview, as I said, that was the one with David Icke in September 2009. And that was really, I'd say, the start of Freedom Central.
And how did that interview change things for you? The direction you went in, and how also does the information that you've written about with the reptiles differ from what maybe David's putting forward? Or does it differ?
I'll deal with the first part. After that, after we did the David Icke interview, which I think has now had almost 200,000 views, suddenly people knew that Freedom Central was another alternative media platform. And we went down to Brussels to a conference. So people knew who we were now, suddenly. And that was where I interviewed Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy together for the first time. And you may notice that interview is not on our website because after that conference, immediately after, when we left there, we were gassed in our sleep and our media equipment was taken from us whilst we were sleeping, leaving money and valuables. And I'd obtained a few interviews and asked a few questions, which I think hit a few nerves at the conference, and somebody took notice and they came for our equipment.
So it wasn't just the Kerry and Bill interview that was taken. There were several interviews.
Yes, of course there were. There was one with Dr. Peter Verreker. He's a mayor from Belgium who campaigns heavily about chemtrails. He's one of the only outspoken senior level people in this part of the world who's standing up. He knows a lot about satanic and ritual abuse. He knows some people are involved in everything. Then there was, of course, Stephen Bassett from the Exopolitics movement. There was also, I'm trying to think now, Marcel Messing. And we managed to replace our interview with Marcel Messing at a later stage. And of course, we managed to replace just an interview only with Bill Ryan at a later stage when we went to Zurich and we interviewed David Icke for the second time. So we managed to get the Bill Ryan interview back. So that is fundamentally, as I said, after doing the David Icke interview, immediately after, we were attacked. So that's how things changed for us. Suddenly we were known and, okay, we are alternative media. Were people testing us to see if we were going to be scared off or were they trying to deter us? I don't know what it was. But you asking about how my information differs from David Icke's is that although I've learned a tremendous amount from David Icke and I really respect him for having the courage to come out and say that the Queen is a reptile, because I can just see why people point fingers and laugh, loudly. But I have absolutely categorically proven it for myself, and I've spent the time going through the archives in places like the Bibliotheca Philosophica Hermetica, which is in Amsterdam. It's the biggest collection of ancient Gnostic and esoteric texts outside the Vatican that's available to public view. And Hermetics, you want to know anything about magic and Hermetics, I've learned so much. So, I've spent the time going through the bloodlines. I've spent the time finding records of lost queens who were reptilians, which are historically recorded that David Icke's never spoken about. Okay, and I did cover this in my last radio show, and it's in the second book. For example, someone by the name of Queen Melusine, who is recorded historically as having scaly legs.
Who was she?
So, she was brought back. I should actually have my notes in it for you, but she was brought back during the Crusades by one of the Counts of Anjou. She married and became
back from where?
From Rome. Yeah, she was known as in a book that's now in the National Bibliothèque of France de Français, which is a national library in France, which keeps these kind of things. It calls her Le Roman de Melusine, which means the Roman Melusine. So she was back in the 15th century when this book was written, known as being Roman, which is interesting because this is one of the very few links between reptilian and Roman Catholic that you can find. And what I've done, one of the things that's different with my information is I've categorically gone and found every single link I can between reptilians and the Roman Catholic Church, which hasn't really been covered by anybody else, because I think most researchers who get to a certain level know the monster with the biggest teeth is the Jesuits in the Vatican, and to stay away from them if they want to have any longevity in the work that they're doing. I think those of us who have treaded more heavily on the subject of the Vatican and the Jesuits have certainly come up against a lot more opposition than those that don't.
Well, that's true. I mean, you don't hear the big mainstream alternative people talking too much about the Jesuits as such. The Vatican will get a mention. The Black Pope may or may not get a mention. Yeah. But, there's not a whole lot out there.
No.
And I think anybody who goes down that road, including Franco Collins, his research, I mean, the road leads directly to the Jesuits. Yes, and there's no question. So it is interesting.
Yes, indeed. And, as I said, particularly from the South African perspective, which is from whence I took this, which is that you cannot go into the control of Africa without hitting your head on a Jesuit. All right. So let's just, from my perspective, I love my country. I love it so much. And I've lived outside it for 12 years. And I long for a time when returning back would be considered a wise decision, because it's not. Okay. The country is absolutely shot to pieces and getting worse. It's going to end up like Zimbabwe. And I'm sorry to say that unless we actually all stand up and do something about this. The bottom line is, talking about Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe was born at Katume Jesuits mission, and he's a devout Roman Catholic. He is the dictator of Zimbabwe who has caused so much hardship and so much suffering that, he's been given an international travel ban and had several, not all, of his knighthoods stripped from him. All right. However, he's a devout Roman Catholic. However, he can't travel anywhere. The beatification of the late Pope John Paul II, which happened last year in May, I think it was. No, it was April, 31st of April, around about then. The travel ban was lifted specifically so that he could attend this event at the Vatican. He's big chums with the Pope. Guess why? Because he's fulfilling the role exactly that they want him to. He wouldn't be in power for 30 years if they didn't want him there. Right? He is doing exactly what they want him to do. And this is what people need to realize, is dictators are put in place by the Jesuits and kept there. And so long as they are keeping the people stupid and poor and making sure the diamonds and the gold are going out the country, that's all they care about. They don't give a damn about human rights. All these little attempts to strip him of his freedom to go here and there and everywhere. Well, hello, he just had it lifted to go for the most ridiculous reason to the Vatican. I mean, canonizing a saint, I mean, that's a whole nother story. Worshipping the dead.
I don't want to take you off. I don't mean to take you off this topic, but I would like to get back to this reptilian princess, queen, whatever she was.
Yes.
and the connection there, yeah.
Okay, right. Queen Melusine. Basically, it's a very interesting story with her. She was, as I said, married into married the Count of Anjou, and the Plantagenets are descended from them. The Saxe-Gotha-Coburgs are descended from them. You can trace a direct line down to Queen Elizabeth from Queen Melusine. Also, Vlad Tepes, Dracula, descended from them. Okay, so it's all in the same bloodline, and you can do it. You can find it. You can go and trace the genealogy yourself. I've done it. So it's not rubbish. I mean, there's a very good evidence here suggesting that the Queen is in fact a reptile, and David Icke's not crazy on that regard. But I see why.
What's said about this Queen, that she had scaly legs? Is that it, or
she did? It's historical evidence. It's historical evidence that her servants claim that she had scaly legs. The legend of Melusine goes, she asked for a weekly seclusion on a Saturday where she would never be disturbed. She said to her husband, never disturb me on a Saturday whilst I'm having my weekly bathe. And then one day he decided to look through the hole of the door and saw her in a half transfigured state. Now, in this, remember I was talking about this book that's in this library in France. Well, they actually have a painting, and I've displayed it several times on my Facebook, and I will send it to you if you want to use it. It's a painting called Queen Melusine's Secret Discovered, and it shows her husband peering through a hole, and in the window you can see her with a dragon's tail and wings, and with the top half of a human, and it's painted in the 15th century.
Wow.
Yeah, very profound stuff. Now, if you actually Google Melusine, and I suggest you can do this for yourself, go to Wikipedia. Now, this
How do you spell it?
Melusine.
Melusine.
Yes, Melusine.
Okay.
This is the, and I'm fanatical about mythology. I've been into mythology since a very young age. This is one of the few very good examples of how we can show historical records being changed into a mythological creature. Because if you go and you look on Wikipedia or Melusine, they talk about her being a serpent-like water spirit known as a nixie, a pixie, a fairy. So you can
Uh-huh.
see how it all evolved. And also in heraldry, Melusine is shown as having two scaly legs, which she holds up with her two hands on either side. And if you look at the Starbucks cup, that's exactly what it is. Have you seen this
Yes,
logo?
yes, yes,
That's
yes.
Melusine, okay? Because that is how Melusine is depicted. She's depicted as the mermaid holding up her two legs. That's the heraldry depiction of her. But she's often depicted as a mermaid, and stories of mermaids. And if you think of the big mermaid film that was a hit when I was a kid, Splash,
Mm.
um, it's also about this woman, in a bathtub. It's all depicting the same stuff. When she was in the bathtub, her tail came back. And also her name was Madison. They like to name them, with M's or the same letters. There's a lot of associations. You go back and you watch Splash. If you learn the story of Melusine, you'll find there's so many associations and so many symbolisms that are hidden in the film that you wouldn't have noticed, like in the early 80s.
No, right.
So, yeah, so that's where mermaids, nixies, fixies, fairies, water nymphs, all these sort of things come from. It all originates from this Queen Melusine, which is why she's so significant. And none of the other research actually touch her. I've never come across her in any of the other books.
So you only discovered her when you started researching in this library.
Well, how I discovered her was going through the bloodlines and and looking up each and every person in the bloodline and seeing what could be found about them. And you can imagine how much time that takes. So, yeah, it's a combination really of looking at the bloodlines, getting notes of who they were, when they lived, and tracing them all and finding out more about each and every one of them, which I've done.
When it
And
comes to sorry, when it comes to researching bloodlines and looking at uh, some of the accusations that are made today about who's related to who, like Brad and Ange are supposed to be related and that sort of thing. And they talk about, yeah, they're sort of, they're ninth cousins 4 times removed. I mean, does that actually make any sense? I mean, I don't even know who my third cousins are, or let alone maybe even my second cousins. So if you go back that far and to that degree, you're going back that and how many times removed, does it actually still have any bearing? Can you really be classed as related? I mean, you and I could be related 16 times
yeah,
removed, whatever.
yeah.
Um, do you think it actually still has any bearing? Or when you're studying bloodlines, are you keeping it a lot tighter than that?
I'm keeping it tighter. Direct bloodlines. I don't go into the geez, I wish, if I had the resources, I would look at them all. I just don't. I try to keep as tight as possible because I want to prove direct links. I'm not after the 13th cousin removed. I'll probably end up finding my aunt or something.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, for me, it's important for people to keep. I'm not the brightest person in the world, to be honest with you, but what I've been able to find, anybody can find, and this is it. You don't want to complicate things. Keep it simple, and if you keep it simple and you go directly down, and you look at a few interesting people down the way, you'll find them. So yeah, that's just what I did. I pretty much kept it. Didn't go into the multiple cousins, and I don't. Going to your question, does it, if there's reptilian genealogy and it's diluted down, and it's the 13th cousin, I don't know, honestly, what impact or effect that has on the person, or if they're controllable by, say, reptilian entities because they've got more DNA, as is suggested by some researchers. I just don't know that information. I haven't experienced it. I couldn't be able to say.
So, okay, so, well, that's good to know that when you're doing your research, you're keeping it as direct
Yeah.
bloodline as possible. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And where did that lead you to? Who's where now in
Okay.
current times?
Well, basically, without a doubt, the Queen is apparently royalty. The reptilian story is it's not a story; it's real. But what I think is very much portrayed. David Icke popularized, of course, this reptilian information, but I think what people have gotten to realize is this stuff, having looked at the documents myself, has been documented for thousands of years. You just got to go and look at some of the artworks from 400 years ago, and you can find artworks of people being depicted with reptilian tails. You can find these things, Lisa. They're not. It's not like David Icke's the first person to bring them out or mention them. They're there if people know what they're looking for, know what they are to be deciphered as. Most people don't understand it. They just think it's some interesting mythological depiction. So, what it's brought me to realize is that there is more going on to the reptilian perspective than what is put out by the mainstream media, mainstream alternative media, as we put it earlier. There is, I believe, I think it's a contingency of good within this reptilian group, because I just don't believe, whether it be human, whether it be reptilian, that any one species or race would be completely bad. When you look at history and you look into sort of a good example, Greek mythology, commonly known, the Titanomachy, which is the War of the Gods, the Titans. They're making a film at the moment, or it's out, called Immortals. And I mean, this is a great example of how Hollywood uses propaganda to move away from anything reptilian. You can trace reptilian beings within the Greek pantheon of gods. So many of them have been described as having, snakes' legs, etc. So yeah, that whole thing was a war of the gods. Who were the gods? It was two groups of reptilians fighting each other. And they talk about this golden age in Greece, where the apparently good gods ruled, and the Greek Empire flourished, and then were taken down by the Romans, who then took over and destroyed the empire, claimed it as their own, take all the art and, sort of made it Roman, made it look like it was all their art and their technology. Now, what's interesting is in this Titanomachy, the story of the War of the Gods, they say they reference something which is commonly referenced in Christianity as the fall of Lucifer, or the fall of an angel. They termed him Lucifer, which is another story. I have my own theories on what Lucifer is. But what that they said is he fell to Rome. This particular, whatever it was that fell, being that fell to Rome, which makes perfect sense because where the Vatican is built, it's built on what is known as the Hill of the Diving Serpents. Okay, the 7 hills in Rome. The Vatican's built on what, the Temple of Janus is built on the Hill of the Diving Serpents. So this is... it's not, you can string all the little links along, and then you go into the Vatican and St. Peter's Basilica, the main altar, which you can never approach in a Catholic church, and I have been into hundreds doing research over the last couple of years. The main pillars that go up on either side of the main altar, they're snakes.
Right.
They're snakes. They are snakes. And then you start looking at the statue of Jupiter, which was the Roman pagan god. They Christianized it and made him Saint Peter. Jupiter became Saint Peter. Now, I have found paintings of Jupiter depicted in the Middle Ages, 15th, 16th century, by grandmasters who were secret society members, so they knew stuff. I found pictures of Jupiter depicted with reptilian legs. Okay, so Jupiter, who became Saint Peter, was always depicted as a reptilian by people in the know, by artists like Da Vinci, etc.
So the what did you call it? The mounds, the seven.
Yeah, it's the 7 hills of Rome. Rome is situated.
The diving serpent.
Yeah, it's the hill.
So diving could in fact be another word for falling or fallen.
The hill of the diving serpent. Yeah.
Do you think diving could be another word for fallen?
It could be. It could be a misinterpretation of the word for falling. Could be, where, or, some clairvoyants who have astral travel said that there is a lot going on underneath the Vatican in terms of structure and potentially an underground passage and city. So it could have been something that went into the earth, and that's why, the temple was built on top. We don't know, but there is all this association and links.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as we know, that is really the root of all evil. Vatican City has only men living in it and altar boys.
Yeah.
That's many people that live there.
You said you had your own theory on Lucifer.
Mm.
You want to go there?
Yes, let's go there. Now this is contentious because this is when I get a whole bunch of people saying she's a witch, she's a devil worshipper, she reads Aleister Crowley. Yes, I read Aleister Crowley. I read Madame Blavatsky. I am very, very interested in the occult. And just again, so we don't have any confusion, occult simply means hidden, and an occultist is simply someone who's interested in hidden information. And that is me. I consider myself an occultist. I'm very interested in hidden information. I believe all craft is neutral, like all technology is neutral. A knife can be used for killing someone, but it can also be used to cut bread. And it's the same with craft. It's the same with magic. It's the same with anything that we learn to wield energetically. We can have intent of malice or intent of good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as simple as that.
Yes.
I think the whole way in which people are awakening, but still viewing Lucifer and the darkness through the old archaic theological dogma perspective is, I think, the biggest obstacle we have in terms of awakening people to the true sort of dynamic perspective of the ubiquitous duality, so to speak. Getting people to understand the importance of the darkness, because without it, the light wouldn't exist.
Yes.
And
I'll go on with that.
Fundamental orientation is so essential to establish. Otherwise, if you are just thinking there's this dark devil out there that's out to get you, do you know what? You end up in a mental asylum. Yeah, especially when you go into the information as deeply as I have. If you do not have the trust and the knowledge that everything that's happening is happening for a very specific reason, I wouldn't say even go as deep as I've gone, because it will drive you mad. There is this belief that I very strongly believe that Lucifer is very misunderstood. Okay, and the only thing I can ever find when I look up what the word Lucifer means is the light bearer.
Yeah.
Just like I think there are many organizations and things which start off with intents of good, which then get infiltrated and labeled as bad, the Illuminati being one of them, the Occupy movement, probably started off as something bad but ended up as something good. There's a lot of different examples you can use of this. Freemasonry, which initially started off as the stonemasons being given the secrets of sacred geometry to build cathedrals, and it's now been used as a platform for pushing people into positions of power, and it's controlled by the Vatican. I think everything has been infiltrated by the Jesuits. And
I've got a theory, or kind of a working hypothesis, when it comes to the Masons, which is, as you said, it started off as a very either benign or with good intentions, as how can I put it? A society for which sacred information and I think wisdom, true wisdom, and possibly true information in regards to our history was, and as you said, sacred geometry and whatnot, was to be passed around, but infiltrated because, and not infiltrated until they were actually in a position to be of use, which had created a worldwide network. And that within the Freemasons, there are still those who hold that sacred knowledge. That I think probably once you get to a certain level within the Freemasons, you go one way or the other. You're either drawn towards what we see as the negative side of the Freemasons and the agenda. There'll be a very small core group who still hold on to the original intent and the original information and wisdom within that. And that there's a they're fighting factions as well. I think that's
Well,
happening within the Masons and within the Illuminati, and you've got the Gnostic Illuminati and the bad guys Illuminati, and you've got there's
yeah.
nothing seems to be too black and white these days.
No, well, this is it. Is that, and I do say this to everyone, like even Catholics within the Catholic Church. I know some wonderful Catholic people. They really are great people. I know I have some of the most amazing Muslim friends. I have, friend of my family's who's been a Freemason for years, and he's just the loveliest guy you could ever wish to meet. I mean, he's notoriously broke because he's rubbish with money. But, so he's not out at screwing people over and being a big, sort of landlord or anything as a Mason. His father was a Mason. He became a Mason. Really a nice guy. And I get along very well with him. Doesn't mean you're bad people if you are part of these organizations. And I think, it's like how very Christian people will say like, if you read Aleister Crowley, you're a witch. It's the same as when us as awake people look at these people in these organizations and we also go, oh, you're bad. It goes the other way too. And we need to be understanding that this is what these people have come to know, and this is their understanding of, their institutional identity. And, when they're ready, if they ever do, they will come to a point where they will either escape that or other be enslaved by it for the rest of their lives. It's, everybody, it's up to each individual person to take that path towards waking themselves up. We can ignore what's going on, but we can't ignore the consequences of what's going on forever.
Mm. So when things like child molestation, ritual sacrifice, all of these things are done, and we're told they're done in the name of Lucifer, do you think that's propaganda, or what do you think?
Yeah. I think there's so many layers to this conspiracy. It's a big, big old onion. And, you can sit on the top of the onion and listen to Alex Jones, or you can creep to the middle of the onion and actually look at what's really going on. And this is, I think that there is the biggest secret of all is that the God that the Jews, the Muslims, the Christians, and the Satanists worship is all the same God. Okay? But it's not Lucifer. Okay? It's whatever it is, it's a bad entity, whatever it is they're thinking. It's not even, I think, necessarily even a real thing. It's just something negative they're giving their attention to and thus creating it in a psychosomatic kind of way.
Right.
What I really believe, though, Lucifer was a catalyst that was introduced to our planet to enact change. I think there was a time when, people say this is a very Crowley-esque Thelemic view, but, Crowley was really in possession of knowledge, whatever people think of him. I really do believe there was a time when human beings lived on this planet. We were created in a way that didn't facilitate our growth or evolution. And, with all our genes being switched off, as most of them are, you can see how that would happen. We weren't able to grow naturally, organically like everything else around us. And so they quite literally had to put an artificial catalyst in, and that came in the form of a negative catalyst, what we perceive as negative, a spark. A good example is people will claim they introduce a vaccination to make you immune, to stimulate the production of certain antibodies within the body. And I guess it's the same sort of thing. They put this catalyst there to give us conflict, to give us contrast, to give us darkness, so that we may learn about ourselves, learn to overcome these things, learn love, light, and forgiveness, and ultimately be given the choice. And that is what is represented, I suppose, in the Garden of Eden, is the choice that we now have, the knowledge of good and evil, which is, I think, very symbolically played out in the creation story. And funny enough, that's where you find the talking snake with arms and legs as well in that story. So, I do believe the Lucifer thing is madly misunderstood. If you've read any true Luciferian doctrines, which I have, and I have read the Satanic Bible, I think the Satanic Bible is a good example of how they, like Catholicism is misconstrued or Christianity has been misconstrued. The Satanic Bible is really also very misconstrued in terms of it's taken the pure Luciferian doctrine and totally twisted it on its head.
So do you think that Satan is purely a church-created figure in order to, it's the boogeyman.
It's the archetype within our psyche. It's the ego. It's everything about ourselves we typically don't like and don't want to accept, and we use it like a scapegoat to sort of pan it onto. We are a microcosm of a macrocosm, and
But
we create this.
it's the counterbalance to God. Either
Yeah,
everything is the will of God or the fault of the devil. For
yeah,
some people, that's
yeah.
no
But
self responsibility. It's either God's will or it's the devil's will. Not my fault. Either way.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so okay, so if Satan is somewhat an archetype that was created purely by the church in order to give us that out, to give us that.
Mm.
But Lucifer is something else again, and yet the two are always used. The two names, the two terms are always used interchangeably, as if they're the one and the same being.
And not.
They're not. No, I agree with that.
Categorically. And you can tell this by, if you understand anything about astrotheology and you've spent a bit of time looking at Santos Bonacci stuff and you've gotten to understand that most of what we understand as Christianity is based on the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars. Almost every character throughout history and all stories can be traced back to the planets within our solar system. Now, if you look at the planets as represented by Satan, it would be Saturn. Okay. Historically, Lucifer has always been associated with Venus. So they're two different planetary bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, for a start. So yeah, we can see them as two different entities. People have mushed them together. No, they're not the same. They're not the same.
What about the idea? I don't know whether you've gone there, but that Satan, being Saturn, and these perhaps the reptilian um, presence came through Saturn, the planet,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that's where we get Satan from.
There's many theories to that. I'm not too sure about that, to be honest with you. I think more it's a case of there's a very nasty group of Dracos who consider us their property. Earth is the part of the Alpha Draconian Empire. We're a colony. Earth is a colony. That's, or a petri dish where they're experimenting with us and they're throwing a whole bunch of different sort of races in from, because we are different races. We're pinker and we're whiter and we're bluer and we're blacker, we're all different races trying to work it all out, working our karma out in this wonderful school that's called Planet Earth, where our soul learns to mature and grow very fast and deal with all sorts of challenges which are put there to help us grow. It's the ultimate training ground, I believe. And, from that perspective, I don't necessarily think that it's come from one planet or another. I think it's possibly there's so many different. There is a lot of disinformation out there, Lisa. I'm not saying I don't have the evidence to say that that's right or wrong. I'll be very honest. I'm not going to talk about things I don't know about. But I would say about 60% of alternative media information being put out categorically is there to confuse us. It's there to cover up and keep us away from the very core truths which we all need to become aware of.
So as we were talking about the Masons being infiltrated and the Illuminati being infiltrated, the whole alternative media scene has also been infiltrated.
Yeah.
You're saying about 60% of it is disinfo.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And
Yeah.
the need for discernment is just, it's exhausting right now.
Yeah.
And I know that there are question marks, huge question marks, in fact, over some of the bigger identities within the alternative media. But who do you turn to? If you're looking for information that you trust, where do you go?
Who do I trust? Now, that's an interesting one. I tell you what, I trust my gut.
Yeah,
And whatever any mainstream person is talking about, when I say mainstream, I mean big name alternative media, which must clearly define that now. Alternative media, big names. Whatever they're talking about, you can find and you can research for yourself because I've done it. So if there's something that interests you and you want to get to the bottom of it, research it. That's what I say. I say trust no one except yourself. Don't give your power away to anybody. Ultimately, the greatest gift we have is the only freedom we have is the ability to make up our own minds. And I think once you've learned that power of discernment, which I think I have, and it's come 3 years of doing alternative media. I think I've learned to understand and identify with what truth resonance really is. Yeah, when something goes, okay, yeah, no, that sounds right, or no, stay away from that. I've learned to identify what it is, and I go with it now. And whenever I've not gone with it, I've always ended up regretting it. So I think that is the most important thing is if people are looking who to go turn to yourself. You don't need gurus. We need to get out of this. Oh, we look to the government to lead us. Oh, we look to David Icke to give us all the answers. We look to, Alex Jones' radio show. People watch this stuff, but you remove yourself from it. You don't follow it. You take it in, you assess it, and then go look elsewhere. Just because these people are putting out information doesn't mean that they're right. Just because they pretend to be on your side doesn't mean that they are. I think for anybody who's waking up, the greatest gift you can give yourself is a good, most people spend a couple of hours an evening watching TVs. Turn the damn TV off, get onto the computer and start watching some interviews. Start learning things for yourself and start working it all out. Start asking questions because the quality of your life really does depend on the questions you ask. And I guess that is where I ended up doing what I was doing because I had a lot of questions.
Yeah, you and me both. So, how many books have you had published now?
Let's see. This is my second attempt of publishing my book. My first, I had one attempt before, but when they read what the book was about, it got put onto the pile, despite the fact that I was given a publishing advance by a big publishing house. Now, this is the second book, which was inspired by my trip to South Africa in 2010, and has parts of the first book in which never got published. And it is now sitting. This is another story, is that unfortunately, talking about alternative media being controlled, and it all ties in rather nicely. As I said, I believe there is a large number of the alternative media that is disinformation. I believe that there are certain people within big names within the alternative information arena who are in fact controlled. Absolutely, I've found the evidence, and I've said a few things on my radio shows. Had people sending me hate mail and everything because of it, but I cannot ignore the truth. Simple as that. And I cannot pretend to follow these people, even though I may have one time have interviewed them or championed their work, when I now know something different about them. And that's only come through spending time going through all their work and information and finding out it's not what they're talking about, it's what they're not talking about. And lying by omission is still lying. Mm-hmm. They're not telling the whole truth. They're telling a part of it. And some of it's mixed up with some very good and believable disinformation, which I've had to discern for myself. Santos Bonacci, when he came on and spoke to me on my radio show, actually said himself as well, 60% of the information put out there is just put out there to scare us. And I have to agree, if not more. Mm. I really am one of the few uncontrolled alternative media people out there. I've been, had so many things happen to me. I get detained in airports every time I go through them. The last time I was detained for 9 hours, my husband was frantic. Now, this is overnight, literally. Came in on a late flight, only got out there 6 a.m. Terrible. I've been gassed in my sleep. We've had our phones tapped. We've been followed. My book. Now you're talking about my book, which brings me to this point. I wrote this book, South African Guide to the Global Conspiracy. I felt the time was right.
It was part of a trilogy, though, yes?
Yeah, it's the first one. And really, this was about the fact that South Africa now has something called the Secrecy Bill in place, which is what they had in the pre-apartheid era when they were controlling the media back then. And they were censoring the media like crazy. And, now they've brought this sort of blackout on the media where government completely controls what goes onto the TV or goes onto the radio station. And journalists who don't toe the line are being arrested left, right, and center. Yeah, so it's not a happy place, South Africa, in terms of freedom of speech. So I bought this book out. This wonderful guy called Robin Jackson approached me last year to publish my book after he found my work, a South African guy who wrote a book called Cults. He's a former Jehovah's Witness who's come out of Jehovah's Witnesses, and he couldn't get his books published anywhere, so he set up his own publishing company and decided to help people like myself. Publishing company is called Expand Your Mind Publishers. And now this book, he delivered a copy of this book to my mother for her birthday, which is very kind of him, gave it to her in her hand. She's very happy. But he's been missing for the last 3 weeks. No one knows where he is. We can't find him. We can't track him. His son is staying with his father in another city. My books that had been ordered through his website online, haven't reached anybody that's ordered them. And my books that were meant to reach me here in the Netherlands from South Africa haven't arrived. No one can track this guy down. And there's other writers who are also expecting their books who can't find him. And very recently, I started to get the impression that something or someone has got to him. He's become more distant, more vacant when speaking to me. You know, you just know that there's something he wasn't telling me. And I just think somebody's got to him. He's either deliberately hiding away because he doesn't want to talk to me about the fact that he doesn't want to continue putting out my work because he's either A, been threatened, or B, been given an offer. And he has recently just had his book Cults being picked up by a large American publishing company. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it does seem like a rather strange coincidence.
So when you say got to him, you're not concerned for his safety? You
Well,
are.
we have had word through a friend of a friend that his father said that he's okay, but nobody seems to know where he is. And his son is not staying with him at the moment. Although it is school holidays there, the son has gone to stay with the parents in another city. And that just sounds to me like he could be worried for his safety and his family's safety. I'm not 100% sure. I do not know. And this is the big mystery. No one seems to know where he is or what's happened to him. I can't get any information at all. And my books, no one knows where they are, what's happened to them.
So
And
including
I
the
don't,
people who work for him in the publishing house, they don't know where he is either.
nobody knows where he is. No one. No one can find him. Okay? We don't know, Lisa.
Is he
Now,
officially
this
missing with the police?
Um, well, today I had a friend of mine actually go to the police station and, I said, look, the only way to get in South Africa, to get the police interested in anything, okay, because they've got so much to deal with there, is to actually go and make a charge. So they went in and charged him with theft because theoretically they paid for a book in January and he hasn't delivered it. That was the only way they can get the police to open up a docket because we don't know if he's missing yet. We don't know. Maybe he is just hiding away. So we can't put in the missing persons. See, I can't track down all his family from the side of the world.
No.
So we've gone that route, not because we want to, but because it's like just about the only choice we have. And what I don't understand is he's done all the work. He's edited the book. He's created my book cover. I have all the files. All I need to do is take them to a book printer here and have them printed. They've been registered with an International Standard Book number, so they're officially legally published. He's done all this work. It doesn't make sense for him to pull out now after having done all the work, and it's a lot of work.
So is this
To
a
do this.
republishing of the first book, The South African
No,
Guide, or this is book number 2?
this is South African Guide to Global Conspiracy is the first book of a trilogy that falls under that label. There was a book before that which I wrote, which also it was called The Evolute, which I wrote, and that ended up on the pile of a publisher in London. Initially, they wanted an expose of sort of the modeling industry and that sort of thing. But as I said, my journey to write a book took me so much further than I could ever have imagined. And by the time I actually submitted what I wanted to publish, they were like, well, we're not going to publish this. Well, they didn't actually say that. They kind of said, well, it's on the pile. And that's where it's been for 2 years. I don't ever think they're going to publish it.
Right.
So what I've now done is I've actually officially written to them and withdrawn. I said, look, if you're not going to publish it, I'm withdrawing the content because I really want to use a huge amount of that content for the last book of my trilogy, which is going to be called The Evolute. So it's the book 1 is Light and Dark. Book 2 is The Eye of the Dragon. And book 3 is The Evolute. And that's all under the South African Guide for the Global Conspiracy.
So is it The Eye of the Dragon that is currently with this guy in South Africa?
No, it's the first one. It's Light
First
and
one.
Dark. It's
Light
the
and dark.
first one, yeah. I the Dragon, I'm finishing at the moment. It's just got all the great information about melazine in it.
Uh-huh.
So that'll be done soon.
So Mel, I have to say, when I started down this journey, I was incredibly naive. I think, in fact, my higher self deliberately put some kind of filter there so I wouldn't even think about these things. I was certainly aware of the alternative media genre because that's where I went to for my information. I didn't see myself as entering that when I started doing what I'm doing. I mean, that's how naive I was. Um, my thing was, I want answers. I have people I want to talk to. Um, wouldn't it be cool if I could make those conversations and the answers that I get available to others to benefit others? And thought, for those people, for those half a dozen people who are out there looking for this information, maybe, they'll find it. Um, and that was as far as I thought about it. What's happened as it's evolved is I've found myself um, kind of labelled into the alternative media genre without even, consciously wanting to go there. And you've been in it for 3 years now, longer than I have. What have you learned about this industry or this whole genre and your place in it? Because there are certainly people that I look at that seem to be untouched. They're very well funded, lots of production, the ability to tour and speak to thousands. Money doesn't seem to be an issue for some. And yet, I think that you and I are coming from the same place. We're just two women who had a lot of questions. We're on our own. We're not connected to the CIA. We're not funded by any corporation. We're not, it's just us and our computers. And Skype. Thank God for Skype. That's it. So, from that perspective, looking at it as a whole industry, what have you learned, and what do you see as being the future of it?
Well, personally, let me just say that I think one of the reasons why it's different for people like you or me, and what a lot of people, they label us alternative media, but this has been nothing other than my journey of discovery, which I've shared with others.
Exactly.
That is
Yeah.
Freedom Central. It's nothing more than that. We're not trying to have all the latest news updates. For us, it really is just a journey of discovery at my own pace. I don't have all the information, but that's sort of how I've gone about it. Things that interest me, trying to learn. I think ultimately I've always had one fundamental orientation, which has stayed the same, and that is truth. Yeah, heading towards as close as I can get to defining what is truth. And what I've come to learn looking back, I must just say, and to quote a horrible cliche, if I have achieved anything at all, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. I have learned so much from truly knowledgeable people. I've learned. I was so utterly inspired by Bill Ryan and David Icke when I started out on this journey, and Project Camelot to a certain extent. But looking back, and I will say from a spiritual perspective, I will start this off with it on a spiritual note and saying that at all times, I think any student learning from a teacher needs to get to a point where they transcend their teacher. Otherwise, they're always bound to the opinions or the paradigms put before them by those who have placed them in their minds, And I really, for me, I think that was the greatest lesson I learned out of everything, was to move beyond what I'd been taught by those who had inspired me. Okay, because as much as there are certain people within alternative media that have inspired me, sadly, 3 years down the line, and I absolutely categorically have come to believe that the very same people who inspired me to get into alternative media and help other people deconfuse themselves from this level of reality, these very same people don't necessarily do it for the right reasons and aren't necessarily doing it for the betterment of humanity. And in fact, I think a few of them are very definitely controlled, whether it be they directly know they're working so covertly or as a cooperative person, whether they're astrally controlled or whether they're mind controlled. There's evidence for all of them within various people, and I found it. And the reason I went looking for it wasn't to discredit anybody else, because, as I said, even Aleister Crowley has important information to impart. Doesn't matter how evil someone is. I'm not judging the messenger. For me, it's about the message. Some of the most evil people on the planet have the best information. Fact, you know. So for me, it was not about labeling so-and-so and so-and-so. However, what I started to realize is integrity is important, okay? Integrity is very important. If you're going to be doing this, I think you've got to be beyond reproach. You have to have shifted past ego, because if you still suffer from your ego, if you haven't moved past your egoic programming, I think the dark forces, the powers that be, whoever you want to call them, they can come in and appeal to your sort of human instincts, be it greed, be it, your need for power, importance. They appeal to your insecurities. I think there's a lot of people, unfortunately, who are in the alternative media. It's not difficult to identify them. If you spend any amount of time watching some of the clips that are out there, you can tell who they are. I don't need to point fingers. These people who are still very operating from a program of ego, and they haven't really, they're looking for, if they are looking for answers, I don't think they're looking for answers because they're trying to enlighten everybody else. I think they're looking for answers because they want to have them as a form of intellectual materialism, to make themselves feel important or appear important. It's a new celebrity, you see. The truth movement's the new hip fringe, sort of out there, I'm an individual, I know something you don't, place to be, and everybody is trying to jump on the bandwagon and become a celebrity out of it. And when people, people will say, "Oh, how do you go about selecting, who you interview?" And there's various ways that it happens. Most of it synchronously, but I do say to people, one thing: Freedom Central is a platform for creating celebrities. For me, I'm out for information. If you happen to be well known and you want to talk to me, great. But what I've now done with Freedom Central is I've spoken to all the high-profile people I want to speak to. I've using the platform I've created now to bring attention to people who really need awareness raised about their cases, real social justice issues which happen to people around us. I think we've heard enough of people standing on the stage, pretending to have all the answers and selling lots of books and making lots of money. I think we've had enough. We really need to start focusing our attention and paying more attention to those areas that really need change. It's all very good and well to be the change you want to see in the, as I say, be the change you want to see in the world. But I think that also comes with taking responsibility and, when you feel the call to action, act on it, because we are all feeling it at the moment.
I had this conversation, a similar conversation recently about who I choose to speak to. And I said, this awakening is happening to everyone, and I would rather speak to my postman who's having some kind of, mind-altering awakening than some high-profile researcher or author just because that's who they are, Yeah. This is happening globally, and it's happening in the suburbs, and it's happening in the country. It's happening everywhere. And everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a piece of the puzzle. Everyone's got something to share. You don't have to be a high-profile celebrity within the industry to have something to say.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is what I encourage anybody who's got a voice to stand up, because this is the time. This is when we need to be heard. And that's what it is. It really is about discovering your voice, aligning with what is right, understanding what is going on and not wanting to be a part of it, just to come back to it in case, people, just to put it into perspective in case anyone's not aware. As I said, everything is controlled from the Vatican. The Vatican, only inhabited by men and altar boys. There is you go onto Wikipedia, you can find, Wikipedia actually has a listing for pedophilia in the Catholic Church. It has its own listing, and it's an extensive listing. Yeah, it goes on and on and on with information. So, this is the core, the sort of hidden practices of those who control our world. and it permeates down into so many levels, this sick and seedy way of which they go about doing things. And I mean, I deal with one of the cases I've been championing for 2 years now is the Robert Greene, Holly Gregg case, which I've worked on, extensively. And when you actually start to see deal with people at the end of what you hear, these stories, you hear what's going on, you actually start to deal with these people one-on-one, you realize this stuff is real. It's not a joke. Yes, they are ritually murdering people. There is satanic abuse going on. I've spoken to, I can't tell you how many victims now. And, the profile's always the same of what goes on. It's the sick institutional practice at the heart, the very heart of the beast, is pedophilia, homosexuality, which, I don't, that's your choice, it's your choice. I have no issue with that. But it's although it's taboo in society, all the guys in the secret societies are, in the not the Freemasons, the Skull and Bones, the fraternal organizations, they have a homoerotic bond. Okay, there's this bond between the brotherly bond. And it is the core of these institutions is all this, what they play out as perverse to us, which we perceive as perverse, and perhaps, it is. There's nothing right with sexually abusing a child. But this is what's going on. And it is the whole Jesuits thing of black is white and white is black. They tell us one thing whilst they practice the complete opposite. And that is, this is what's going on. I've interviewed the people. I've seen all the evidence for myself. And when you start to understand the fundamental heart of the beast, you get to a point where you either go, okay, this is what's going on. I'm still going to get into my car. I'm going to drive up the freeway, go and sit in my glass and metal cage, look at a computer, talk to, on a telephone, photocopy, answer to a big boss and ignore everything. Or you can decide, I no longer want to pay taxes because my money is in the bullets and bombs that kill people. I no longer want to acquiesce to a system of slavery. I no longer want to be, paying taxes to a government that uses the money against us to vaccinate us. You can make that decision, and that's the road we went down. We just decided, hell no, I am in my mid-30s. I've been married 11 years, and bloody hell, I want to have a family. And I just am so damn scared to have children because it was part of this journey as well, was looking at the world around me and assessing the potential for my kids, what their future would be. And I tell you what, Lisa, I am pretty scared for my kids right now. I am. I haven't had kids yet, and there's a reason for that. It's not because I don't want them. I just don't know at this stage, having learned what I've learned, how easy it is for them to take your children away. Mothers that I work with who feed their children raw are having the kids taken away because they don't feed them meat. There's this real control, if you go against the effort of them to make you sick, they'll take your kid away. If you don't want to vaccinate, you don't want to feed them meat, you go against their efforts to make your child sick, they'll take your kid away. This is the society we live in, and this is, and I said to you, I think what an incredibly brave woman doing this, knowing what you know, and having 3 children. I have the utmost respect for you. Because I tell you, I'm not that brave. I'm really not that brave. So yeah, it's for me, I think the most important thing for people who are finding their voice is really to understand that if you don't use it and you don't come together, we don't unite on our common ground. And human beings are actually quite simple creatures. We ultimately all want the same things. We all want to be free. We all want to be happy, and we all want to be loved. And if we can find that common ground, we can just understand that about each other. Find the common ground, unite on that, and start seeing each other's similarities instead of each other's differences. We can change this planet overnight, and it's as simple as that. That is a very simple message. And once I realized that, I was like, okay, well, I know what I've got to do. And I went down this journey. I think I lost myself, I found myself, I lost myself, I found myself so many times in the information that I guess I eventually got to a point where I realized that one thing you've always got to do when you're looking at this information is At all times, you've got to be questioning yourself all the time. Okay, so I've come to know that. Let me question it again. And I've come to know this. Let's question that again. Once you've awakened, reawaken. Look at everything. If you're asking yourself, if the information David Icke is putting out is true, why has he not been taken out? And that's a common question. If that is a question you've asked, dig. You'll find the answers. I did.
I actually asked him that very question. I said, "Why are you still alive?" From recall, his answer was just that he's protected. Energetically was the implication. And that he's also, because he's not frightened of them, he has raised his vibration to such a level that he doesn't buy into the fear, and without the fear they can't touch him, kind of thing. It was essentially the answer. And when it comes to parenting, motherhood, sorry, there's the cockies. I'd been researching and looking into this whole Illuminati New World Order thing for many years prior to becoming a mother. And I had to stop when I got pregnant. I just stopped reading. I stopped all of it. I couldn't go there. I couldn't bring a child into the world and have my head in that information at the same time. And I stepped back from it all and just focused on parenting. But having that baby was something that I just had to do. It was as I don't even know how to explain it. You just when it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But I'm also very optimistic about our future. Regardless of all of this information, and regardless of how ugly it gets, and how twisted our history, and regardless of knowing the direction in which some people want to take our future, I'm still really optimistic. And I know that my kids are here for a reason. And I just believe that they have an incredible future ahead of them.
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing for any parent is to become informed and certainly not subject their children to, the mindless brainwashing and acceptance of the lies that unfortunately, we were pushed with. But I quickly want to come back to something you were saying, Lisa, about David Icke, that question, because that was very interesting. If you don't mind me jumping around a bit.
No, go.
He said the same thing to me. It's because he vibrates. He goes, he vibrates on one frequency and, they're on another frequency and the two frequencies don't meet. It's like one frequency's of a radio station is here, another one's here. You don't listen to them at the same time. He's on a higher vibration. And this struck me as it does sound logical to someone who doesn't really understand things. But at the end of the day, David Icke is human. He's still flesh and blood. If during my interview with him, both of them were in person, live interviews, if I pulled out a gun and shot him in the forehead, he'd be dead. End of story. Bottom line is if they wanted to take him out, they could. And that's truly what I believe, because people are being taken out all the time. Very good friends of mine, journalists, are going missing. Microbiologists are going missing. There are people every day being brought to my attention from all over the world that are going missing. Journalists, all sorts, researchers, you name it. And I've used this very good example before because, of course, Rupert Murdoch, former Australian, his News of the World was shut down, his newspaper, because, of course, News of the World was hacking telephones, okay, and hacking emails of the citizens. And this whistle was blown by a very good friend of mine called Sean Hall, who a week after he blew the story wide open, he was dead, and no one is investigating him why he died, okay?
What about how he died?
Or how he died. No one's investigating it. All I know is that he's dead. Okay, I can't get any more information. It's a blackout on the information. Now, this is what else is quite interesting is, now this is the other theory I've been working on. Now coming to know what I know about the alternative media, how many people are actually what I believe to be co-opted controlled by intelligence agencies. Okay, definitely I can prove it for Alex Jones. I can absolutely prove it. It's a very provable trail, which I'll go into if you want me to in a minute. But what I've learned is that there is no line between mainstream media and the bigger alternative media. All right, there is no line. They're the same. Okay, they're just speaking different things. They're on the line that is not in favor of benefiting humanity. They're on that side of the line. Okay, then there's people who I think genuinely have humanity's best interests at heart in terms of providing information and educating, which I think is what I do with my work. And that's the only thing I've ever wanted with the information I put out. It's not because I have a CIA boss or a contact, which I think many of them do. Now, what I was the point I'm trying to make about this is, I believe media, okay, all media, is actually just a CIA project. All media is controlled by this, not CIA, I mean intelligence agencies. CIA is just a generic term we've come to understand as the American intelligence agency. The whole intelligence network of the world is controlled by the Jesuits. All media, provable fact, is controlled through the CIA, all mainstream media. Okay, we can trace Alex Jones's Gemini Communications Network is owned by ABC Disney, which is in turn owned by the CIA. Okay, the reason I bring this into the Rupert Murdoch story is quite simple because the news of the world were hacking people's telephones. Let me tell you now, mainstream media and intelligence agencies are one and the same. Okay, they have the same powers of reach towards people. They have the ability to hack into people's emails, into telephone calls. They're the same. They share information. Mainstream media, the journalists. In fact, if you historically look at Ernest Hemingway, you look at Mark Twain, you look at some of the most famous journalists and writers of the past, they were all spies. They all worked for intelligence agencies. Okay, media and intelligence, it's the same thing. Media is just the mind control apparatus. It's the mind control arm of the intelligence agencies. And this is something people need to understand as a fundamental orientation, is that it's not something separate. They are one and the same body. And that includes, as I said, the bigger names within the alternative media.
Do you want to name any other names?
Well, yes, of course. I mean, it's no secret that I am very much have concerns about David Icke. And I've voiced this very openly before. And the history between myself and David Icke goes back quite a way. And as I said, got the first interview from him, got the second interview from him, made a film, and was all good. Went to South Africa in 2010 to sort out a conference, which he asked me if I was going to do. I mentioned I'd be going out to South Africa, and then he emailed me and said, "Are you still going? Do you want to sort out the conference?" And okay, no problem, I'll do it. I flew out there, my own expense, started to sort the conference, and suddenly, after a mysterious trip to Rome, he had a change of heart about coming out there, and I was basically left stranded for 6 months. I couldn't get a flight back because it was so expensive. It was the middle of the Soccer World Cup. I had nowhere to stay, no money. I was living back in my parents' house, which, it's got lots of space. My mom and dad are just not the most open-minded people, so it was tough. A lot of conflict. And, of course, being South Africa, I was subjected to a lot of crime. I was party to or witness or involved in at least 4 robberies and a sexual assault, So it was a tough 6 months that I was left there and nowhere to get back. And my husband couldn't get to me. He couldn't afford to leave his job and come out there for me. And it was incredibly tough. So there's that. Then, I just thought it was really strange that he left that, considering he makes, and I know he makes at least, I've checked it, £250,000 a year just on book sales, that he didn't pay me back the money that he emailed me and promised me he would pay me back, which he never did. It's not about the money anyway. What on my issue with David Icke comes down to his research. It's quite simply this. I've read almost every single David Icke book. I've done reviews for all his books. He's posted some of them on his website. They're there. So it's, I got his book sent, his latest book sent all the way to my house in South Africa, because that's where he sent the last one. That was my last known postal address to him. And having gone through each and every single one of his books, unfortunately, he doesn't go into the Jesuits at all, other than like the Jesuit Illuminati order. He'll mention them in passing in a name. He won't ever discuss them. And having sat through, three of his performances in three different countries, I can tell you now that not once does he ever go into the Jesuits. And I personally believe he is protected by the Jesuits, and that's how he gets to do what he does and not have any issues. Because I have tons of issues. I get flagged up at airports. I get, gassed in my sleep. My publisher's gone missing. My book is being suppressed in South Africa. David Icke doesn't have these problems. His books are sold very openly in South Africa, no problem. So there's all these things, and he doesn't mention the Jesuits. And
So
they, to me,
but how does it serve the Jesuits to have him talk about all the things he talks about, other than them anyway? But how does it serve their agenda to have him out there educating the world on what he is?
It's a good question. I think what they do is they put a lot, and this is what they've done with Alex Jones. They've put people like Alex Jones and David Icke who work together, okay? I mean, if you know Alex Jones as an agent, okay, would you want to work with him? No, but I'm sure David Icke and him know that each other play the same game. That's why they're mutually beneficial to each other. But they're put out there for a deliberate reason to catch those people who, okay, realize, I mean, the official story of 9/11 insults the intelligence of a child. Okay, so they wake up at that level. There's got to be a net to catch them from falling too far into the truth. And that's where you got, as you say, the layers of the onion you got to peel through. On the top layer, you got Alex Jones, and some people stay at the Alex Jones level of the conspiracy, and all they ever go on about is 9/11, the Federal Reserve, and the Zionists. If you're talking about the Zionists, okay, you've been listening to Alex Jones, you've been listening to David Icke, because what people don't realize, the Zionists report to the Black Pope. I call them cashews. They're Catholic Jews. Yeah, they're controlled by the Catholic Jews. So, this is cashews. Yeah, cashews. This is what they are. They are Catholic Jews. They're controlled by the Vatican. People must never forget that. What everyone now going on about the Zionists and the Jews and all of that being the problem, what is happening is they're setting us up for another Holocaust. They want to kill off all the Jews. They're getting all the Jews to Israel because I believe they're going to nuke the hell out of Israel at some stage and kill off all the Jews. They've been planning this for years. Let's ship all the Jews to Israel. When we've got them all in one place, we're going to kill them all off. I reckon that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I actually think that's what this whole thing is about, is that Israel is trying to provoke other countries into destroying them. They're trying to provoke China, or they're trying to provoke Russia. They're trying to provoke somebody else to wipe them off the map. And that the poor friggin' Jewish people are once again the human shields for the Zionists or the cashews, as you say. That they are the human shields, and they will be once again sacrificed because this Vatican Jesuit component, very occult driven, very run by cycles, and it's time. It's time for them to reset the clock, and in order to do that, they need to pay for their sins, so to speak. But they're using the souls of others to do it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, there's if you understand, and I do, occultism and how they, how things relate on the astral. And I've been studying hermetics in France, and I've been getting into this stuff, and I really enjoy it because this, to me, is the pure science, as Santos Bonacci says. It is the pure holy science. This should be taught to kids from the day they start school, to understand how to work with things on the astral, which we totally disregard. In a 5 sense reality world, and these people know their stuff. They know what they're doing in terms of, they're very ritualistic. Almost everything that gets done, and I thought this was a joke at first when people started saying, it's all about ritual, but they don't. They teach you this in school. I don't know, like I did speech and drama at school. The first thing we learn about the history and the origins of theatre, it started in ritual. It did. Theatre starts in ritual, music starts in...
Go to any Catholic mass. That's what it is. It's just a theatrical ritual.
Yeah. That's every stage performance, every conflict between good and bad is the Seth and Horus, light and dark. That's all it is. And this is when you start to realize your whole reality is a ritual. Okay, everything, all films, watching sport. Yeah, the haka. Have you seen? I mean, it's a war dance before a very pagan ritual of putting a ball between two pillars. How phallic is that? You know. So, there is this whole, you start to realize, okay, we live in a cult culture. There's a reason it's called culture. They didn't call it culture for no reason. It's all about cultism, and it's all about ritual, everything we do. And they try to get us into a routine, into these rituals, going to church, doing these various things to get us programmed into that mindset. And, one thing I encourage everyone to do is, if you're going to drive to work a different way every day. Don't get programmed into a mindset, because once you're there, you're so controllable.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah.
So where do you see our future? Where do you see us going?
Do you have any idea how many times I get asked this question?
I do, because I get it as well.
I am the eternal optimist. I mean, I wake up every morning, and it is the best part of my day is waking up, because I wake up happy in a loving family, in a beautiful environment, and I'm grateful. And it's the most important thing is for each and every person, no matter what you're going through, to always express gratitude, even for your suffering, because trust me, it's a gift. And I wake up every day and I know that no matter what happens next, if today is the last day on this planet, that's okay, because I'm going to make the most of it. And I do. I make the most of each and every day. I'm an artist. I paint loads. I write my books. I try to be a good wife. I dream about being a good mother, but over love a little kitten, which is my only child at the moment. And I keep it simple, because I think if I had to focus too much on, okay, this is what the future is, I think it would depress me. Because I'll be honest with you, Lisa, when you look as deeply and darkly into things as I have, it is difficult to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But I don't believe this is all for no reason. I believe this is an evolutionary process, and whatever suffering we're going through, ultimately I believe in the process, which is that it's for a greater good.
So what credence do you give to the whole 2012 talk? Any?
Yes, I do. And you know what's brilliantly interesting is that I've actually recently realized the whole Jesus story, dead up and then resurrected, up, sun rose, it's the whole astrotheological story, okay? I've realized that is actually a prophecy of our future, and could be. There's been a Japanese princess recently came out saying that between the 21st of December and the 25th, we'll have 3 days of darkness. And can now think about that. Take the template of the Jesus story and put it against what is being said there. Okay, the sun dead for 3 days and then rose again. It is going to be dead for 3 days if it's completely black.
Well, it does that every year anyway. In the sense of it sits at the horizon, sits at the same spot on the horizon for those 3 days, and then rises again.
That's right. But it's not. It's still light. You still have day and night. This woman's saying we're going to have complete darkness.
Well, she's not the only one saying that. That's been said for.
Yeah. Well, that resonates with me. I don't. To be honest with you, it's the most logical thing I've heard about this. And that when she said that, I was like, okay, now that sounds right. And that fits in. How everything works in cycles, and everything is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and the reverse. And I think as well, this Jesus story, the whole they weren't trying to the story of the Jesus, the son being born and then dead for 3 days and then rising again. It goes back through so many cultures, and they preserved it in their mythology. And having gone to the depth that I have with mythologies, I've realized it's the things that people find important. They preserve in the mythology for the future. They were trying to tell us something. Yeah. Okay, it's all about this moment. Everything we've learned in religion, everything we've learned about the stars and the moons, is all about bringing us to this point in time. Okay, they've been telling us through religion that this is what's going to happen. They've been preparing us. This is why there's so many souls incarnated here at this point in time, is to experience what comes next, which is why I'm not worried. Whatever it is, come what may, I'm not worried. And as you say, back to the 2012 thing, what do I see for the future? Yes, I am scared to have children now. I'm hopeful that there will come a time when having kids will be considered a wise decision. At the moment, I'm yet to be convinced of that at this time. But, like everything else through this journey, when I started out, the very people who inspire me, I've realized probably aren't on our side. Like everything on this journey, I have changed and grown so much at every point, every new bit of information that I've committed to my memory, I've changed. Like literally, my biography has become my biology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for people not to hang on to, okay, so you've let go of the belief in Christianity. Don't get hung into Ikism. Transcend that. Do your own research. Find the truth for yourself. Don't have somebody you look up to. We need very much to be in a place where we're tearing down our idols and not putting people on pedestals and iconoclasticizing them. We need to find the greatness within ourselves and not feeding the monster that is the celebrity ego.
Well, I mean, in the 25 years that I've been on what I would consider my own personal spiritual journey, I've taken in a lot of information. I've read a lot of books. And, sometimes one 400-page book can be worth the read because of one line in it that triggered a knowing within me. And the information that you take in is just information that you take in. But it's what it triggers from within you that becomes wisdom, that becomes knowledge, And as much as the information I've taken in has certainly opened my mind to ask better questions, perhaps, or I guess that's the main point. It changes the quality of your questions. Very little of it results in true wisdom, because it's only that stuff that really clicks within and gets you to have an aha moment that's worth it. And I've said multiple times that if you could sort of put this time down into a catchphrase, it's about self-responsibility. It's exactly what you're saying. It's about we all need to get in touch with that that's within and come from that place of knowing. And what I'm finding interesting at the moment is how information is resonating with some people so completely and not with others so completely. And the cult-like mentality that can go along with some of these individuals or some of the information that they're sharing, that gets scary. And I've had a couple of run-ins recently with cult types. But it's about each of us just getting in touch with that inner wisdom and that inner knowing, and how we can call it the new age arrogance, that comes along sometimes, where I've had an awakening and now I know the truth and everybody else is wrong. Keeping that open mind that as we talked about the onion, and everything is so multi-layered and multi-dimensional, that what feels right today may not feel right next week or tomorrow or next year, because more information's come in, you've grown, you're approaching information from a whole new perspective. So just stay loose mentally and emotionally, and not too attached to any one person or any one set of information, because it's constantly evolving as you are.
Yeah. And I say this to people all the time: don't believe me, do your own research. All I ever meant to do is not standing up and saying, listen to me, I have all the answers, because I certainly realize that the more I learn, the less I know. What we do with the work that's become Freedom Central, it's purely a journey of discovery for ourselves. And at the time when we discovered David Icke, to me, he was right. And I've since realized that he is in fact controlled, and that, he doesn't talk about the Jesuits, who are the main controllers of everything. And I've come to know very much about the Jesuits because I started, after David Icke let me down about coming to South Africa, I decided, okay, what can I do to help my home country? This guy's not going to come out here and help them and speak to them. And what can I do? And I wrote that book, inspired to help my home country. And, I then started looking into like who these people are, and the Jesuits, it keeps coming up. Eventually you can't ignore it. So I started researching the Jesuits. Oh my word. Once you understand the Jesuits in their totality, and like, your interview with Franco Collins, I mean, really, if anyone hasn't watched it or listened to it, highly recommend it. Once you start to understand who they are, and in my book, I have actually taken the opportunity to print the Extreme Oath of the Jesuits, which I think is possibly one of the reasons why my books have been suppressed, because David Icke, in his 20 books, 700 pages, some of them, has never once printed the Extreme Oath of the Jesuits, which basically is the blood oath. These guys swear to death in their own blood, okay, to, kill babies, flay feet, conquer, destroy kings and principalities. I mean, you can read it for yourself. It's in my book. It's there. They basically lay out their entire plan.
At what point does a Jesuit take that oath?
On becoming a Jesuit.
At the very beginning of entering the Jesuit school.
Yeah, and this is the best. The Knights take it too, because I've sent you a copy of, at least, of the Extreme Oaths and their true meanings. It goes through the Jesuits' oath. It takes you through all the Knights' oaths as well, which are all very similar. And what I've done is I've decoded the Code of Inri, which is INRI, which is it's a Latin term. I can't remember it offhand. But it basically is, every time you see INRI above a cross, it is so significant because that is the Jesuits' code of saying, yes, you're looking at Christ on a cross, but really it's all a big joke. We control everything. It's their mark. It's their secret code. Okay, so every time you see INRI, it's normally always on the top of a Catholic, in a Catholic church or on a Catholic Christian cross. Look out for that. And I've given the full explanation, and I've photographed INRI in so many different places. I've put them all into the book to explain exactly what it is, where it comes from, and the origins of it, so people can understand exactly what it means.
What book is that in, and where can people get a copy of it?
It's the very first book. If anyone's interested, just email me. At the moment, my publisher and all my books seem to have been, my publisher's gone missing and no one knows where my books are. So if you want a copy, I'll happily send you an e-book version. And it's in the chapter titled Secret Oaths and Their True Meanings. And yes, Extreme Oath of Jesuits, the Code of Inri, you've got to understand it. Once you understand that, you get that, you will understand that the Jesuits control everything. Okay, they are the ones at the heart of absolutely everything. They control the Knights, they control the intelligence agencies, the Freemasons, the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, the Bohemian Club, all the way down. They control the Hells Angels, they control the mafia, everyone. They control the entire drug trade, and it's quite a network. And when you actually trace the head of all various orders up, you come to the same person, which is the Black Pope. You go up through the orders of the Freemasons. The person at the very top is the head of the Jesuits.
What's his official title? It's like general. It's a military title.
Yeah, no, it is. The Jesuits are a military order, as are all the Knight orders. They're military orders. And that's why the hospitals, named of the Knights Hospitalia, hospitals are military institutions. It's the superior general of the Jesuits. That's what they call him. And his name is Adolfo Nicholas Pachon. Is the current Black Pope, and he's far more powerful than the Pope himself. In fact, the Jesuits are even more powerful than the Pope, because the Pope has to confess his sins to a Jesuit priest.
Yes, he answers to the Black Pope, doesn't he? The White Pope answers to the Black Pope, basically. Yeah.
And his Council of Jesuits. He's actually lower than the Jesuits, the Higher Council of Jesuits.
There was an announcement recently that he was going to step down in April, which is unheard of, the White Pope.
Well, there's a prophecy that with the next Pope comes the Antichrist, or something like, you see one more Pope with the, I think the unfortunate thing is with the Catholic Church, and there was very recently a piece on YouTube, which I was just, cheering away, because it showed the Pope, all these cardinals and bishops lined up, and the Pope, this little old man coming along, and none of them wanted to shake his hand.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
I was like, these guys are waking up. I think because he is known as the king of pedophiles, I think with all the expose of pedophilia within the Catholic Church, they need to pin it on somebody and have someone take the rap. And, like, um, for example, George Bush or Obama, whoever takes the rap for all the invasions and whatever else on behalf of the people who control them, that's what's going to happen to this Pope, So. But he's not blameless. He was Joseph Ratzinger was actually a Nazi youth. He was in Poland when he was a kid. He was part of Hitler's army. So
they've tried to put that down to him not having a choice. The youth were compelled to do that sort of thing, and explain it away that way.
Well, look, having living in Europe and interviewed numerous war veterans, let me just say that I've had so many of them say, "Look, we didn't have a choice. If we didn't swear allegiance to the Nazis, they killed us or put us in jail. We didn't have a choice. We had to." So people can call us Nazis. The guy at the head of IKEA, he was part of the Nazi party, the guy who started IKEA, and people were boycotting IKEA because he was apparently a Nazi. He said, look, back in those days, if you weren't a Nazi, you got killed. If you were considered a traitor. So, yes, I agree. When you've got that kind of pressure on you, what do? You say to the guys, yes, we believe in you, but inside you do your own thing. So, I understand that kind of pressure because I think we're really facing it at the moment. But at the moment, it's been done through massive amounts of brainwashing and propaganda. They're trying to get us to agree to and love our own servitude and drug us into submission.
I love your passion. You're clearly very passionate about everything that you've learned and sharing it and helping to educate others. Is there anything, we've been talking for nearly 2 hours now. Is there anything that you'd like to leave everyone with?
Sure. It's funny. At the end of my interviews, I normally say to people, Freedom Central's a platform for people who have a message for humanity. What would your message be? And funny enough, after all this time and doing this for so long, I don't exactly know what my message for humanity would be, other than we have to seek a better world. Whatever it is you're doing, don't criticize. Ask yourself, are the choices you're making contributing to creating a better world? Are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? I think everyone, not just the awake people, and even the awake people. I mean, you yourself have mentioned there are these people who now become intellectual materialists because they suddenly know something that somebody else doesn't, and it's the ego again. As I say to all people who are awake, reawaken, re-examine, re-question everything you already know. Define the truth if that is what you're after. Don't just accept that it's been given to you because, it's David Icke or Alex Jones. Look further and, most importantly, with all this darkness and stuff that's going on, learn to enjoy the moment because, whatever happens in 2012, whether the earth goes bang and it blows up and that's the end of it, or whether we genuinely do move into another dimension and we are living in fifth dimension, maybe we don't have to eat food anymore and suffering and all that goes away. If that happens, then great. But I think the most important thing is that if we are leading up to that point, we need to do as much as we can to prepare ourselves and people around us, because I think the easier the transition is for a greater amount of people, the less difficulty we're going to have once we get to the other side.
You just reminded me of an irony that I've noticed is that at this time the feminine's being spoken about so much, but it's men out there. It's still the men out there who are the loudest and leading it, saying, yeah, we need to raise the feminine. Quick, follow me. I know. It's like, yeah. Really? Yeah. And there's not enough female voices out there. And I don't believe that my role is one of the messenger. I think if I have a role at all, it's to provide a platform for the messengers. But there needs to be more female messengers come forward, I think. That doesn't feel... It's not that it doesn't feel right or genuine. I mean, I do believe that men who are saying these things genuinely mean it. George Kavassalis, I think, is very, very genuine in his affinity for the feminine. Um, John Lamb Lash, also with his old Sophia myth, very, very genuine in his empowering the feminine. I'm not trying to take that away from them, but um, it still does appear to be very male and very male ego specifically, led. Follow me because I have the answers to the feminine. Let's go. There's something not quite right about that.
Well, yeah. Yeah, there are, unfortunately, as much as we're trying to move into the new paradigm, okay, we're doing it with the old paradigm practices, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The suppression of the sacred feminine has never gone away. Many people, of course, who know this information by now knows that whole human female liberation movement, which Gloria Steinem fronted, was all funded by the CIA. She was a CIA agent. She's admitted it in her book. Miss Magazine, which was also funded by the CIA, she has admitted that in her book as well, saying that she never had to get paid advertisers because it was so well funded. The only reason the whole women's lib movement went ahead was simply get women paying taxes, get kids into school younger so we can control their minds. All right. So there was never the liberation of the female. The feminine has always been suppressed. It's still suppressed. Let me give you a good example of this in modern day society today, Lisa, and I talk from personal experiences. Unfortunately, I'm just being blonde or whatever, big boobs, I get harassed a lot by men. When I was working in a sales environment, I had to leave one particular job because I was sexually harassed, and I took them to court, and I lost because all these sales guys stood up there and denied it, and it was me against them. There was more witnesses on their side. I then find out that only 3% of all sexual harassment cases brought by women actually end in favor of the claimant. Okay, so it's 3%. Not even worth it as a woman. Yes, it's not even worth it as a woman if you get sexually harassed at work to take it up through the legal system, okay, because it doesn't favor us. All right, it's a patriarchal system. It will always favor the male. And I learned this again in another case that I went through with the opposite, okay, where a woman was accused of harassing a guy, and you know what? It ended in his favor. And it was the absolute biggest load of, and I was a witness in that one. I wasn't actually taking someone. I was asked to witness the whole thing because I was working at the company at the time. And, I saw what happened, and it was totally misconstrued. And the guy won the case against the girl who was claimed to have sexually harassed him. And I just don't understand it at all. And if you saw what these two people looked like, it's obvious that it was more likely the opposite way around. You couldn't understand why this girl would be sexually harassing this guy. He was hideous. So, for me, there is just on a when you bring it back to today, a legal level, I think there's a lot of in jobs, women always get paid less than men. The sacred feminine is suppressed, and there's a very good reason for that, because I genuinely believe that once we get that balance right, once women are truly equal on every level, when men even respect us as equals, and let me tell you, I am very lucky to be married to a Dutchman, having had the mindset that they have here, okay, which is very liberal, even-keeled, and he's given me all the individuality and autonomy, and I'll look at some of these other women whose husbands dictate to them and tell them what to do, and I feel sorry for them. And they take it because they believe that's the way it is. And it happens a lot in South Africa because we have a very patriarchal, male chauvinistic society. And this whole chauvinism, the whole ego thing, it's always going to be in men. Men inherently are more prone to the ego than women are, which is why, unfortunately, we do still have the problem with, as you say, some of the bigger voices, predominantly men. They're not beyond reproach because they're still in their egoic programming, where I think it's easier for women to shift that and go back into their nurture state, which is our true natural state. To nurture, to raise families, to grow vegetables, to feed, not to be the big ballsy, bravado protector. That's not our role. Our role is to nurture. And to be honest with you, it is so true. And my husband always says, behind every successful man is a strong woman. And, I think in our relationship, it certainly is true. and that, we balance and complete each other, and we look at each other completely as equals, which is why we work, and which I guess is also why Freedom Central has such a strong base. There's no conflict within Freedom Central whatsoever. Our roles are clearly defined, as in what we do. He's on the technical side, I'm the creative and dealing with the information. And I think if everybody could find that autonomy and balance, with the sacred feminine, in whatever relationship they're in, particularly the men, it starts on an individual level, respecting people and treating them, no matter who they are or what they are, as equals. And in terms of Gaia, everybody's equal, even on an animal level. An ant soul is no less than a human soul. And, when you got that fundamental orientation in place, you need to understand then that also, just from a man's level, as a woman, I don't need to say this, but men also, particularly the more patriarchally minded, need to start acknowledging the sacred feminine. Because for too long, we've neglected the entire cycle of life on this planet. The energetic schism has happened as a result, and we're sitting with the problems we have now. So it's obviously not working.
No, a rebalance is definitely on the cards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Starts with us.
Well, pleasure. Absolute pleasure, Mel.
Yes, Lisa, it's been great. I love chatting to you.
Yeah, you too.
We'll do this again sometime, I hope.
I'm sure we will, because I'm sure people will have lots of questions for you. But
okay.
They will. You've probably sparked a bit of controversy, as well as brought up a lot of questions, I would think. So, yeah. freedomcentral.com?
freedomcentral.info.
Info.
We thought we'd be different. And just to let you all know, you introduced me in the beginning as Melanie Spencer. That's my family name. If anybody wants to get hold of me on Facebook, I'm under Mel V. Of course, because of the whole natural persons, etc., that whole story. I don't use my Melanie Spencer. That's just my family name, or my legal person, my legal title.
Yes.
So it's Mel V. If you go onto Facebook, please add me and send me an email, chat to me. I'm always open for questions, and get in touch and start searching.
Well, it's probably 2 o'clock in the morning for you, so go to bed.
9 minutes past 2 it is. But it's been great chatting to you, Lisa, and I'm sure we'll speak to you soon.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.